Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Artisan Pirate here, and in today's fun scroll saw project video, have a creative and versatile design, and it's going to be a miniature compound cut Christmas present Christmas tree ornament, showing off the scroll saw's versatility. The design in question comes from an older issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing, winter 2021, issue 85. There you see the cover of the magazine for reference, and the article and project begins on page 33. Here you see what we are going to be making over on the scroll saw, and again it's going to be very miniature and very small and fragile, but it says compound cut present ornament. Scroll the shape and peel off the waste to reveal a gift that keeps on giving, by Clayton Myers. So thank you, Clayton, for this very versatile design, showing off once again what a scroll saw can be capable of. The rest of the article is on the following page, as well as the full-size pattern. I've already got it photocopied and laying here on the table saw, and you can see how small the pattern is. Again, a compound cut pattern. It's not even as big as my fingers there. And the article has a great description on how to go about cutting it out over on the scroll saw. As a matter of fact, I made this project last year and documented it on my social media feeds at Christmas time, and it got such great feedback that I knew this Christmas season I'd have to come back and document making one on the platform for you guys, and that's what this video is about. You need a 1 1/2 inch square strip of material, and I have selected out of the scrap bin a piece of walnut, and I milled it down perfectly square. Of course, I made sure my table saw was dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees. And with compound cutting over on the scroll saw, I hope it goes without saying, for that 3D effect to come out properly, you need to make sure that your scroll saw is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees. So before we even make our very first cut, I will double check and make sure the scroll saw is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees with my 3D printed blade alignment jig. And for this project, I have cut off our actual blank from this piece of walnut, and you can see how small and delicate this piece is going to be. How small the blank is. Again, a 1 1/2 inch square strip of walnut here, and since this piece is so small, it can be a little bit tedious to get a good handhold on it while the scroll saw is running. Of course, your fingers would have potential to get very close to the scroll saw blade and have potential to get nicked or anything like that. So I'm going to be using in this video what is called a compound cutting jig. My buddy Robert up in New York made this for me, and he brought it down and gave it to me when he came down and visited the Woodworking Extravaganza for the first time. I believe it was in 2022 when he came down the first time. But here it is, and you can see how basic it is, but you can also quickly tell what its job is. There's 2 pieces of all thread here, there's 2 pieces of wood here, there's 2 lock nuts in the bottom, and what you basically do is sandwich your blank in between the 2 pieces and crank down on the wing nuts to give you more surface area to grip while cutting out small and delicate projects over at the scroll saw. It's also made out of wood, so you don't have to worry about this jig scratching or marring up your scroll saw table. I would use this jig a lot more to cut out the compound cut keychains because they are 1 inch square, but you are limited with a jig like this, the length between the 2 all thread pieces there. Now of course you could make the jig longer, and that would give you way more surface area to grasp onto. I used this jig when I made the very first one and documented over on my social media feeds, as I said, and I'm going to be using it today. Once it's sandwiched in, we will make sure everything is perfectly flush and slides smoothly over on the scroll saw table. But since what we need to do now is trim out the pattern and get it attached to our material with clear packing tape and drill our pilot holes, let's move the camera and do that now. And over here on the workbench, we'll take a straight edge and an X-Acto knife and cut the pattern out, and I'll fold it as precisely as possible at the halfway point and attach it to our walnut blank with clear packing tape. Clear packing tape is all I'll use to attach the pattern here, and once it's attached, we will head over to the drill press and drill out all 12 of the pilot holes for internal cutting. And I am using a larger than normal drill bit to drill out the pilot holes because I'm going to have to use a larger than normal blade over at the scroll saw due to the thickness of the material. But once all of the pilot holes are drilled, we will head over to the scroll saw and double check with our blade alignment jig to make sure everything is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees. And we'll thread the blade through the first pilot hole, and we are ready to begin. For all of the scrolling on this project, I'll be using a bigger number 12 reverse tooth blade, and that is because of the 1 1/2 inch thickness of the material. And because of the thickness of the material, it is a much slower cut as opposed to thinner 1/4 inch or 3/4 inch material. I always keep a supply of thicker blades on hand for the unique compound cuts, because compound cutting really shows off a scroll saw's versatility. And with the thickness of the material and the thickness of the blade, I cannot get those sharp hairpin turns like I can with the number 5 Ultra reverse tooth blades that I love to use for most of my work. So I'm just cutting out rough circles here, and then I'm going back and making sure that the squares, the corners, are nice and crisp. You'll see how I'm doing that here in the up close view. If you guys like what you're seeing, I would highly encourage you to subscribe to my channel and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. I'd really appreciate the support. And you can easily tell what the compound cutting jig is doing here. It's giving me more surface area to grip, as opposed to just trying to grip that small and delicate piece we are cutting out. So a very versatile jig to have if you like doing compound cuts over on the scroll saw. But now we are already halfway done, and I'll step back over to the workbench and loosen the wing nuts, and you can see the progress we've made. And I'll flip the piece, and I'll tighten the wing nuts back down and make sure everything is flush, and we'll be ready to head back over to the scroll saw and cut out the other side. But one thing to keep in mind, when you flip a compound cut piece, the blade will sometimes be cutting through what I call negative space, so the cut will be a lot quicker on this side. I know it's hard to tell in the time-lapse portion, but when that scroll saw blade hits the open air of the negative space that's inside the piece, it might want to jump or jerk, so always keep a firm grip on your piece when you are doing compound cuts. I hope that makes sense. But it takes around 30 to 35 minutes to cut this piece out completely from start to finish. And when I finish this interior cut here, it'll be time to release the decorative bow that makes up the top of the present, and I'll loosen the wing nuts again and open the jig enough to where I can flip the piece all the way around to where I can do the details of the small presents bow. And I'll do those small V cuts there, and then I'll follow that wavy perimeter cut line to complete this side of the work. But please keep in mind, when you get to the end of this cut that I'm doing here, the piece will want to pop out of the jig, so I've got a hand on both the piece and the compound cutting jig. But I'll tape that piece back in we just cut out, and I'll lock it back in place in the jig and flip it, and we'll repeat the process on the other side, beginning with those 2 V notches and then releasing the wave that makes up the top of the presents bow. But not all scroll saw work will be done. We'll have one final cut to make, and for that I set the jig aside and do the basic flush cut at the base of the present. But now all the scroll saw work is done, and we'll take the X-Acto knife to cut the pattern and peel it away, and we get our first visual of what the finished piece will look like. It will be time for lots and lots of sanding. And due to the delicate and fragile nature of this piece, I opted to sand everything by hand with sanding sponges and Klingspor Woodworking Shop sandpaper. And a subscriber sent me this set of diamond needle files, and that was a great tool to use to get into all of the nooks and crannies to sand away all the fuzzies. But you can sand this project as much or as little as you want. But once I was happy with how everything looked, I walked over to the other side of the workshop and put the piece on a hook and prepared for finishing. And for finishing, I used several coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss. And when that dried, the project was complete. And here we have the completed miniature compound cut 3-dimensional Christmas present, cut out completely from start to finish over on the scroll saw, and it finished up beautifully with some nice and crisp details in it made out of that piece of walnut. I want to once again thank Mr. Clayton Myers for the versatile design from a previous issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine. This design really shows off what a scroll saw is capable of using the compound cutting technique. Really, really neat. It took me around 35 to 40 minutes to scroll the project out completely from start to finish, and you can see it's not very big in nature. It's just with the nature of it, you need to of course take your time and let the blade do the work, because you are scroll sawing through a 1 1/2 inch piece of stock material to achieve the beautiful 3D design that we made in today's video. And speaking of taking your time and letting the blade do the work, I want to talk about this scroll saw blade for a second. I used a number 12 reverse tooth blade. That's a lot beefier blade than my standard number 5 ultra reverse tooth blade. You can see one of those blades there. You can see how thin it is. It barely comes up on camera. But the thicker blade allows you to smoothly and cleanly cut through the thicker material. You could see in the time-lapse portion that I just wasn't able to make any of those sharp hairpin turns like I can with a number 5 blade. I was having to back up, round the corner off, and then come back and make that fine point with that thicker, more robust blade. But it is the appropriate blade to go with when you are cutting out something this thick, and I hope the results speak for themselves. And one more thing about the blades and compound cutting, and I'll use a number 5 blade here to illustrate what I'm trying to talk about. Once you cut out all of the interior cuts on one side of a compound cut piece, and then you flip the piece over to complete the other side in the 3D image that you are going for, when you thread the blade through the next set of pilot holes, there's going to be ultimate waste wood that the blade is floating in. So I always tell people the feed rate in which you feed your material into the blade is going to change drastically. It's going to cut a lot more smoother and quicker once you flip your piece over. So I always encourage people to keep a firm grip on their project when they are compound cutting over on the scroll saw. Speaking of a firm grip, that is why I used the compound cutting jig that my buddy Robert up in New York made for me. Thank you once again for this versatile jig, my friend. I was able to sandwich this very small piece of material in between the 2 blocks of wood there, and I was able to have a great and proper handhold on the piece throughout the whole scrolling process, and my hands were nowhere near the sharp blade of the scroll saw. So a very versatile jig that doesn't take up much material to make one custom like Robert did here. Once again, a nice little look at it. Very simple to make. But I made this piece here out of walnut, and because I used walnut, I seen no need to add any additional splash of color like a paint or a stain. All that's left to do, once the Rust-Oleum clear gloss dries overnight and it's no longer tacky in some of the areas, I'll add a nice decorative ribbon to it like I did on the original one I made last Christmas season off camera. Again, I made one to get familiar with the process last year, and I was so happy with it I knew this year I would have to come back and make the project and bring it to life over here on the channel. And I hope that by me doing this video, it has inspired you guys to go out in your garage or workshops and try a project like this. Now, you do not have to cut the project out of walnut. You can of course cut it out of a lighter material, say pine material, for a little bit softer cut over on the scroll saw, with pine being a soft wood, and then you can go in and add additional stains. You could mill up a blank of exotic woods to really make a project like this pop, kind of like that Spectra ply, I think it's called, turning blanks, you know, for, you know, they're just layers of multicolored woods. I think that would be a nice visual. And of course, if you wanted to, you could go in with acrylic paints and really paint this up to make it look like a miniature 3-dimensional Christmas present. But I'm going to be happy to add a decorative ribbon and add it onto the Christmas tree with all of the family heirloom ornaments that we use year after year. I know when I put this one on the Christmas tree and people came over and took it off the tree and looked at it, I'm like, hey, pick it up, look at it, take it off the tree. They were looking at it every which way, and they're like, what store did you buy this out of? We know you go to the beach a lot, you know, we know you like antique stores and thrift shops. But I'm like, no, made 100% completely from start to finish over on the scroll saw. Once again, showing off the versatility of a powerful tool that doesn't take up much of a footprint out in a garage or workshop. But now I have 2 of them fully complete. I can put one on the tree in the model train room, and this one can continue living on the family Christmas tree with the family heirloom ornaments. I want to once again show the magazine that this project was featured in. Again, it's an older issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing, winter 2021, issue 85, with the birds on the cover, in case you guys were curious. And the design and article begins on page 33, and there you see a picture of the one that they did in the magazine to show you guys what it's going to look like, and the full-size pattern follows on the following page. Really great resources for Scroll Saw Woodworking are these magazines, and I always look forward to getting new issues. But really cool. I had a lot of fun in today's video, and hopefully you guys picked up a tip or tidbit along the way for compound cutting over at the Scroll Saw. One more look at it. Again, just really happy with how it came out. Really neat. If you're new to the channel, hopefully you'll click that subscribe button, and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. As always, links to contact me as well as all my social media feeds will always be linked down in the description box below these videos. That's about all for this one, and remember guys, if I can make it or do it, so can you. I'm the Artisan Pirate. Take care, and I'll see you guys real soon.